all feelings just were gone. All the chemistry and emotional feelings that I'd had for Kelly were gone. And then I had been discerning the priesthood. So I went and we broke up. I went to the seminary.
Welcome back to God Nod. My name is Casey, and today I have two special guests on the channel, Kelly and Jim. They are from Michigan, and they are here to share their love story and how God brought them together, and to really show how God is part of every single step of the way towards His will. And so I want to welcome Jim and Kelly. Thank you so much for being here and just to be a witness of the Lord and His love for us. So can you guys just go ahead and just tell us how your story began?
Sure, yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah.
And Kelly and I agreed that she wanted me to start telling the story, so I'll lead us off and then Kelly will probably interject. But we are from the same town. Kelly was 2 school grades ahead of me. Of course, she was the most beautiful girl to ever come out of that school, and I had always kind of had a crush on her. And our families went up north after my freshman year of college, and Kelly was dating somebody else. And my mom always taught me that if there's not a ring on that finger, she's fair game. So that weekend, I think I spent more time with Kelly than her boyfriend did. And that, the following week, I was in my house working up the courage to call her, thinking, okay, I know she's got a boyfriend, so how am I going to ask her out, acknowledging that, but at the same time going forward with it and not seeming disrespectful to this other guy, and not knowing how she would take me asking her out when she's seeing someone else. And the phone rang, and it was Kelly, and Mitch was the other guy's name, and somewhere between up north and the ride home, Mitch he just didn't make it. So we went out, started dating immediately. The chemistry was just really good from the start. And Kelly came from a home that you guys would have said you were Christian, but not really active, practicing any faith. But she had been searching for God in a lot of different ways. And so it might have been the first date, if not probably the second date, where I invited her to go to Mass, and she said yes. And next thing you know, she really started to fall in love with the faith. And she got baptized, so that would have been the summer of 95-ish, in 96, somewhere in there. And she got baptized the following Easter, went through classes through RCIA, got baptized, confirmed. In the moment, and I had been starting to think about a vocation to the priesthood. In the moment that she was baptized in this church in Detroit called Assumption Grotto, it was almost like I didn't hear a voice, but almost like God said, okay, the work here is done. And all feelings just were gone. All the chemistry and emotional feelings that I'd had for Kelly were gone. And then I had been discerning the priesthood. So I went and we broke up. I went to the seminary, and a few of us, there's a bunch of guys that I stay in touch with that had been in the seminary at one time or another. And they said, yeah, we thought we were being called to the priesthood, but we were being called to go to the seminary. And it was it was a time of, Kelly and I had been talking about marriage, but during that time in the seminary, it was a real time of growth and maturity for me.
Yes, my whole life we were considered Christian by name, but didn't really practice. We would go to church for a wedding. That's pretty much about it. But I always believed in my own way. And then I remember going to vacation Bible school with one of my best friends. She invited me, and that was my first God nod. And I just remember having like this beautiful experience there. And then when I was in high school, I played basketball, and right before the game, I remember all the girls locked hands for varsity, and they would say the Our Father prayer, and I remember I didn't know it, and I felt so sad and embarrassed, I guess, too, thinking I don't even know this prayer, and I really, really wanted to know it. That was another God nod for sure. And then my brother, who is married to my husband's sister, he also became Catholic through his sister and their family. And when he was baptized and confirmed, we went to the church. And at this point, I didn't really even know much about our Lord at all. But I remember I sat in the front row watching, and I opened the book that was there. I don't even know if it was a Bible. I don't remember, but it had the Our Father prayer. So the whole ceremony, I just memorized that prayer. And I was so excited because I just thought, I've always wanted to know this prayer. And here it is right here. So I sat and memorized it during that. And on the way home, I told my mom, I said, oh, Mom, I memorized this prayer, the Our Father prayer, because I was so excited. And she started crying, and she said, she was kind of searching at that time too, and she said, Kelly, I wrote you a letter, and the one thing that I said is maybe just learn a prayer, and that's the prayer that I picked for you to learn. And so that was just such a huge God wink and God nod as well. And then the next fast forward in college when we were dating, I remember feeling so empty when I was in college, and it was a time in my life that I had zero responsibilities. I mean, my parents paid for everything. They're so generous my whole life. They always took care of my brother and I so well. And I wouldn't say we had a lot of money, but they never alluded to that. You know, I mean, we had like a big thing of coins that we would count, and that would put food on our table, my dad said. But just a very beautiful life growing up in that sense. And they paid for everything, and I remember being in college thinking, in my mind, I remember thinking I could go buy the whole mall right now, and I'd still feel so miserable inside and so empty. And literally that's the time that we went up north for the first time. And Jim and I, hit it off, and right away he invited me to church. And I remember when we were up north, my brother and I, that weekend, were the last ones at the campfire. And I remember crying and telling his name's Eddie, and I was just saying, I'm like so miserable, like I need to find God, but I don't know how. And he's always been there for me too, but he said, well, you can go to church with Jennifer and I. And I just remember thinking, oh, that's great, but like that wasn't, it just didn't feel right. And that's when Jim and I met. I mean, I would have gone, but he was the catalyst that I needed, I know, and he invited me also, and I went. And so then I was with my brother and Jennifer and Jim and I, and it just was such a gift. Then became Catholic, and then Jim and I broke up. Well, then I moved to South Carolina, and I'm living with a dear friend that I love immensely. She's fallen away Catholic, and we're in the Bible Belt, South Carolina, so I had to drive 40 minutes to Mass. And I was so new, like it was hard, the roots weren't there for me so much. And I mean, I was young, and it was all like my love to go to the bars and beach, and it's just the two of us, and we made really nice girlfriends there and everything, but just living a pretty superficial life, really, it was hard to stay really cloose to our Lord with the situation that I was surrounded with. And I remember I loved being down there. I loved my job, but I remember my soul was starting to get antsy again because I wasn't filling it with our Lord, and I was thinking maybe I need a new job. I don't know, but I love my job, so nothing kind of was adding up. It wasn't making sense.
When I came out of the seminary, we talked. I wasn't ready to start dating yet, but then our siblings are married. So they had their second child, and they invited Kelly and I both to be the godparents. And which was just Kelly was living in South Carolina, I was still living in Michigan, and so we come together and are godparents of their baby together, and then we went up north again. And things started to click, and I had made a list because I knew how susceptible I would be to, just fall in love and fall for somebody because of attraction. So I had made a list of all the virtues that I was looking for in a woman, and I said, oh my gosh, Kelly's got all of these. She's incredibly sincere. She has a great sense of humor. She's chaste. She's very hardworking, very reliable, super loyal, and just has a heart for people, really, really loves people deeply, and very self-sacrificing, wants a big family. So all these things that I was looking for, in addition to the very strong physical attraction too. And so I just approached her and we started dating again, but she was living in South Carolina, so it was a very long distance relationship, which made chastity really easy. We were hardly ever together. We spent a lot of time on the phone. And back then, this was before cell phones, so we would go to pay phones, and I forget the name of the program, but there was a program where you could leave each other voicemails.
For free.
For free. Well, you were working, so
Yeah.
you had some money. I didn't have any money. I was going through college and working on the side, so everything I was making was going to pay for college. And then things are going really well, and I started to feel called to give a missionary year to the church. And Kelly's a new Catholic. Ironically, I had the church that she was baptized in shortly before we started dating the second time. I was in the same church for a wedding, and it's in Detroit, so I almost never went there. It was probably the first time I was in that church again since her baptism several years before. And you're at a wedding, you're single, you're thinking about your own vocation to marriage and who you might marry, and the doors open and the song starts playing for the bride to walk through, and all of a sudden there's just this rush of emotion for Kelly in the same way that it had left years earlier. And so I always remembered that, and when we started dating again, the chemistry was really strong. I really felt like God was asking me to give this year, and I had went on a retreat, and it became really clear it was what God was asking. And so I told Kelly I wanted to do it, and she was mad, and she said, I'm not going to wait for you. And I told her, well, you could go too. And she said, I am not doing that. And a few months later, she had her own call.
So it's our girlfriend's birthday, and we took her to the beach in Charleston, and we're out Saturday morning. It's the last bar that's open, 2 or 3 in the morning, and we're at this place, Mama's Blues Bar. And I just remember it's all dark and looking around and just seeing this, I don't know, just the environment just was so superficial to me. And I remember just thinking, I've got to get out of here. If I stay in this life, I'm going to ruin my soul. I just felt so strongly, a really overwhelming tidal wave. And then it was I need to be a coworker. I need to be a missionary. But I didn't, it came out of nowhere. It was like a 2x4, literally. A tidal wave is just how I felt. And I had no idea what that meant. And, but I remember telling Jim, thinking, I might do this thing too, but I don't know, I had to pray about it or think about it for a little bit, a week. And so after 1 week, I decided, I'm going to do it, because I was at the point in my life where I knew either God had to give him everything, or he was going to get nothing. I could not balance the two. And as soon as I jumped on that boat and gave my 2 weeks notice, it was complete peace, and I felt like I'd never been happier in my entire life. So the program started in about 3 weeks. So I was living in South Carolina, so we had to get all of my stuff home to Michigan and then go to this program that started. And so I arranged it. Okay, in 2 weeks, Jim graciously offered to fly down, and we were going to drive a U-Haul back with all my stuff. And the night night that he flew down, he proposed. So, so we spent our entire engagement as missionaries. I was in Atlanta, Georgia for most of it, and Jim was in Dallas, Texas. And then we were married the following October. So we did a lot of phone calls, and I think we got to see each other every month and a half just because of airports, Atlanta airports, and then going home for Christmas and such. And I think on our honeymoon we joke and just say this is the most consecutive days we've ever spent together. So it was long distance the entire way, but yeah, God's hand. I mean, I could just see how He's always knocking at our door, and He's always nodding His head, and He loves us so much. So I just pray that everybody has that hope and knowledge that He's with us, right next to us, carrying us, holding our hands, loving us, and He'll never let go. So I think just keeping our hearts open is the best we can do, and the closest we can get to perfect love, and getting back up when we fall.
And I look back now and think, we'd have had a tough marriage if we'd have got married that first time, because I had a lot of growing up to do. And even though we were chaste, I think there's a difference between trying not to sin and really protecting somebody's heart. And so I made some commitments as I was leaving the seminary to really be the kind of person who was not only going to avoid sin, but really try to protect the woman that I'm with, protect her heart and my own heart before marriage. I think it's worth noting too that during our whole engagement, when I say protect, I wanted to protect Kelly's heart and my heart. We had read a book that's old and in many ways outdated in terms of its language, called Clean Love and Courtship. I don't know if you've ever heard of the book, but this book was really the most helpful thing I ever read in terms of helping me understand how a woman perceives physical affection and how a man perceives physical affection. And I think I would recommend that book or anything like it to any young people who think they're called to be married, because for me it totally shifted our interaction before we were married. And just as one example, we decided relatively early on, the second time we started dating, not to kiss, because other than I would ask Kelly if I could give her a kiss on the cheek. And it was mostly because, at least for the way guys are designed, that is just the start of a whole process in the body that God has designed to accelerate and to come to a climactic point. And so once you start that, there's all kinds of hormones and brain chemicals and everything else that get released that are driving toward that end. So we just decided not to even play with it and to really protect our own hearts and save that for marriage, and use that time then to get to know each other really well and communicate. And then of course enjoy all the passion that God has in store for married couples. And then what we've noticed, at least for me, that we did not use natural family planning until later in our marriage, because we were using Nature Plans Your Family. We just decided to have kids right out of the gate. Although God had in store for us, it was a year before we got pregnant. So that meant whatever that would be, 21 months before we had a baby. So we had almost 2 years together of just being a young married couple. But with natural family planning, there's this beautiful courtship that goes on again for us every month that takes us back to almost like it was when we were dating, in that same type of intensity and everything else. So I just think there's great wisdom in the church's teaching, and if we follow it, it demands some sacrifice, but it's also the path to happiness, which is what people want. And we can't just take the pleasure and not have any sacrifice with it. But there is just great joy and great peace and great passion and pleasure within the church's teaching. I have a friend who is about my age. I'm 45 right now. We were cool at one time. And he's right around the same age, and something came up about sexuality and natural family planning, and he's been with Hollywood actresses. He's been in multiple people, sexual situations, just a very, very progressive sexual lifestyle. And I was telling him about this dynamic in natural family planning where the whole curiosity and interest intensifies during these times of abstinence for my wife in a way that I'm more interested now even than when we were just newlyweds. And my interest and desire is even stronger than it ever has been. And he was saying, that's amazing because I don't even get that when I'm with a new woman. And I just think, again, it goes to show the wisdom of the church and its teaching in sexuality. It's not just to follow the rules, or it's actually a path to happiness.
Right. The rules aren't arbitrary. God's not,
Yeah.
you do this because I said so. It's, I want happiness for you,
Yes.
and I want you to be fulfilled, and I want goodness for you, so this is the way.
Yes.
And if you want happiness, like, follow this way.
Yeah.
So that's a very, very good point. Because I
Yes.
think a lot of people see it as, well, it's a rule, who follows it anyway, like, I don't care kind of thing. But, like, if you truly want that fulfillment and that, like, that to not, like, the sex to not get boring, as they, like, say, or, like, whatever,
Yeah.
but, like,
Right.
to do it the right way and to follow the way that the Lord has ordered it to be, to the right end. So thank you for sharing, because that's really good. Wow, that's so beautiful. And I think our culture today is so on the contraceptive end. Can you just maybe speak a little bit about kind of what you were saying about how, like, we want that happiness and that fulfillment in marriage, and on how contraceptives are like a way of, like, not fully giving of ourselves, and that freedom and that joy that comes from just, like, really get, like, as soon as you get married, not using absolutely anything and just totally trusting in the Lord's will for your marriage.
I would just say, look, as a man, if we're really in touch with what it means to be a man, we would not want to put anything into our wife's body that is not good for them. And there's all kinds of side effects to contraception. So, and of course you could do surgical things too, but just from the pill itself, it would feel so self-centered and so selfish for me to have my wife use a contraceptive, knowing that it's got side effects that aren't good for her, so that we don't have to, demand self-mastery over ourselves. And then, so that's one thing, but even for other means that might be, we've listened a lot to Christopher West and to some other speakers on theology of the body, and there's just immense wisdom in respecting sexuality for what it's for, and it's both for bonding and for babies. And to say that we want it for bonding and for the passion and the pleasure, but we don't want it for babies right now is really pushing God out. And we're saying we want part of your creation, but not all of it. And it's
Yes, that's exactly what I was thinking as you were talking, how it's basically saying, you can have this part of me, but you cannot have all of me.
yeah.
And that in itself there's a selfishness there that is outside of God's plan.
Yeah, and I think it's John Paul II that talks about just this dynamic of two people married, open to life, really trying to love and please each other. And when that moment is the closest, I think John Paul II says it's the closest on earth that we can get to the feeling of heaven. It's hard to describe the joy and the peace and the passion and the selfless. It all goes together. So at least in married life, it's probably unlike any other thing where you might be giving of yourself and very, I'm sure Mother Teresa was very at peace in giving of herself. But in the marriage, there's that gift of self, but also the whole embrace and passion and physical that goes along with it, that is like heaven on earth.
And then another question I have is, can you just tell a little bit about your discernment process and how you felt called to the seminary, and then your discernment process of discerning out of the seminary?
Yeah, so the discernment to the seminary was, actually I had a couple of really dramatic things that happened in my life. A very close friend, probably my closest friend at the time, was killed in a car accident in the spring of '96, I think that was. And then my roommate at college had moved out at the semester. So I spent that Lent, I read all 4 Gospels, I spent a lot of time in prayer, I read the Imitation of Christ, and it was just a real draw, almost like the I Thirst from Mother Teresa's talk. I had a crucifix in my room, I would spend time just looking at the crucifix in prayer. And then in the seminary, I told my spiritual director, I was in with the Legionaries of Christ, and I would tell my spiritual director, whenever I'm in a talk or something like that, that's go save the world, save souls, really intense, it would be a priest. But if I was just at peace and at prayer, it was be married, have a family. And so I just kind of discerned through that I think God speaks mostly through priest or through peace, more so through real intense emotion, and then my spiritual guide kind of helped me with that. So that was the main thing, is just that peace, and the same thing with the discernment to be a missionary. There's both. I think the wisdom of the church is there's both a recognition of the emotional or the inspiration that we might sense or feel, and then there's the intellectual knowledge that goes along with it. So if somebody feels like they're attracted to somebody else and they're married, well, our brain should tell us, okay, that's not God, that's the devil. Even if it feels like it's God, this is not of God, it's of the devil. So that's an extreme case. I think that's obvious and maybe even a caricature. Although I do know one person who told his mom when he was leaving his wife for another woman that God sent him an angel. And it's a real self-deception. And so we really have to, in discernment, I think, be brutally honest with ourselves. And, if we're going to be selfish, it's better to just say, I'm going to be selfish, than to
Not
try to
pull the God card.
Yeah,
kind of thing.
there you go.
Yeah. I think, especially with our culture today, it's super hard to, especially when our culture looks down upon purity and being a virgin or being chaste. And then you have Christian couples who are trying to strive for the Lord and pursue a chaste relationship. Do you just have any advice on that area?
I would say, number one, it's worth waiting, is the biggest thing. And then once you're committed to that, having a prayer life is so important, because look, we are made to be together. We are made to procreate, and there's a real natural drive for that. So you're working in some ways to work according to God's plan. You've got to be willing to sacrifice what is a very natural drive. And then I would just say for couples that want to be chaste, you really need very clear lines that you just will not cross. It's also not wise to bring alcohol into the mix. And that's even worse if you're already pushing lines, because the lines get blurred in a hurry with alcohol. But, because we're made for this, for us anyway, for me, and maybe it's different for women. You could probably speak to this on what it means for a woman in this regard. But there's just got to be a really clear line that is communicated with whoever you're dating, that I don't want to cross this line because of the temptation that it brings. And I guess be open and clear with each other.
Yeah, I think that communication is crucial to the relationship, and we know really struggling in their marriage, and I think because the communication just gets sideways. And I think with Jim and I feel like how our relationship is so, it's on solid ground. It's built on solid ground with the understanding that we assume goodwill and trust what the other person says, and then you feel safe to go back and say, it sounded like you were saying this. Is that correct? And allow each other the freedom to communicate openly and honestly, and not expect perfection, but always to assume goodwill. Because if you don't have that trust and that knowledge of, we're in this forever for good. Like, it doesn't matter what happens, what's said, like, I'm yours forever and you're mine forever. And it doesn't mean we don't hit bumps in the road, because that's life and that's gonna happen, and you know, you're living in a fantasy land if you think it isn't. But it's allowing yourself to have the tools and the freedom and to know you're loved unconditionally. And you know, sometimes I'm just like, I just need to vent and don't take it personally, and like, oh my God, you know, we just have that communication and that freedom with each other, that we're not judging each other, and we love each other where we're at. And some days are, you know, I have hard days, and he doesn't usually. He's very forgiving, very loving, very generous, very kind, and a strong leader. And but a lot of prayer, like, and I would say one thing with our relationship, you have never made me feel guilty about where I'm at in my journey, or pressured. It was always from the moment we met, it was an invitation, always an invitation. And it was, I mean, you invited me to Mass the first day, you still invite me, you never force me to come, and it's just, it makes me want to do more, you know. And you've never forced anything. It's always a free choice that you've allowed me to make in our relationship. And if I can give any advice, I would say that is a really powerful tool to have in a marriage, where you're inviting your spouse, but more importantly, you live it. So you invite through living. I would say you've always just been an example, and a strong one, and then I want to follow suit with it. You know, he's always been a leader, and you always pretty much let me have my way as long as it's good for me. It's so beautiful. I'm so spoiled. He's so sweet.
Yeah. And Kelly leads me too, just with her goodness, and it's definitely mutual. I think so. We spend a fair amount of our time trying to help other couples who are in tough spots in their marriage. And there's two common denominators when people are really struggling in their marriage. One is, in all the people that we know well, there was somebody in their life before they got married who was saying, this person is not good for you. And they didn't want to hear it, they didn't want to listen. So I would say if there's a couple out there and you have somebody telling you that this person is not good for you, they have your best interest at heart. And what happens is immense suffering later on. And then another common denominator is blame. And when things aren't going well, one person just wanting to blame the other. And there usually is one who's probably more at fault, but it's a inability to see something from somebody else's perspective without placing a judgment on it, in a moral judgment. So this is just a simple story, but we started our marriage in Texas, had an ice storm. I went out, looked at the roads, came back in, and Kelly said, so what are you gonna do? And I said, I'm gonna go to work. The roads seemed good enough. And she said, well, what do you think I should do? And I said, I don't know, I mean, the roads seem good enough to me, but you're on the expressway, you got about a 20-minute drive, I got about a 10-minute drive, you might want to check the roads. And I think I may have even went out and checked them again, and she said, well, what do you think I should do? And I said,
Do whatever you want.
you know, and then by the time I got the third question, I knew I was not giving the right answer, but I didn't know what answer she wanted. And the next thing, the tears come, and you don't care about me. You're gonna let me go out there on the roads and put myself in danger. And Kelly's dad would have been very much, hey, you know, and have a clear set of guidelines on what she could and couldn't do. So I think that's what she was expecting. And we laugh because we bring these things into our marriage, and there's a moral framework around that if you care about me, you won't let me go out on the roads, which in my family it was, if I care about you, I'll let you make your own decisions and trust that it will work out well. And so those things that just seem practical in our marriage, oftentimes there's a moral framework behind it in our minds that we might not even be conscious of. And then it makes us say, not only do I disagree, but this person is bad because they don't care about me, or they're doing something wrong because of their perspective.
Yeah.
When a lot of times it's not really a right or wrong, black or white, but you know, those frameworks get put around it. And we've had several things like that we work through and then we laugh about later, but some people can't laugh about it.
Well, I would say definitely make the commitment that you are going to take time to pray every day. And we actually went to a great talk a priest gave, and he said 2 things for couples. He said, every day, this is it, the wife's hand and say that Our Father, right? So you say the Our Father every day. And then the other thing, he said 3 magic words. How are you? So every day, if you can pray the Our Father holding hands and ask the other, how are you? He's like, it'll save your marriage. So I always thought that was great advice. But with prayer, I would say we just have, always made it. And I haven't been perfect, because when you have a lot of little kids, it's really difficult to carve time out. Just as a mom and a dad, it's 24/7 of go and taking care, and to actually sit and to pray, it's like, first of all, you don't even have the quiet time to do that, and it's almost more energy to do that than to just kind of like take care of the children. So it's a very conscious choice that you have to make. But we've always gone to Mass every Sunday, and we usually have been going daily. And we say night prayers together, I would say 75 to 90% of the time with our children. We have 6 children, and we're at least saying it with a couple. Everybody's kind of off in different directions right now, but I would say always evening prayer, prayer before meals, and we go to a Catholic school, so the kids are saying it. It's a lifestyle. It's definitely a lifestyle, and we have a very large family, and they live it. So we're submersed in it, and I've learned from my in-laws, so Jim's mom and dad, that if you do it right, it works. And they're the most generous people I probably have ever met in my life, where it's just constant giving, and they never expect anything back.
Yeah, they don't keep score.
They don't keep score, and I tell his mom, I say, oh, Gima, I want to be like you when I get bigger, when I grow up, because
She's 5 foot tall, maybe.
just constant giving, just constant, and bringing the family together, and they've done it right, and it works, and the kids love to be together, they love to be with them, and with each other, and we pray the rosary for fun as a family. We're outside praying the rosary on with a bonfire and just like the kids are playing and having fun, and you can be yourself. And but it doesn't mean that we're perfect and we don't have issues that pop up, but it's always resolved with love, because our foundation is Christ-centeredness, and it's not just kind of like prayer here and there. It's just like we're here because God made us, and we love him back. Like, that is what we're created for. So everything we do is in that realm of just, we are his and he loves us, and we try to promote that with our children and family, and just getting back up when you fall, teaching, because it can be very, I know how the devil works. He knows our weaknesses, right? He knows the buttons to push. So he knows if you're thinking, oh, I can't have what they have. Like, I'm, too much of a sinner. I've done too many bad things, or opposite. I'm better than they are, and I'm, righteousness, whatever it is, he knows how to push buttons. And if we're true to ourselves, we know what our weaknesses are, and when we fall, but it's, the devil wants to kick you when you're down. He wants division, and I think our family knows that. Like, he wants division between good people and good things, and he's going to put a wedge there anytime he can. And the only way to break down those wedges is with love and walls. Like, no, not on my watch. I'm not allowing this to happen on my watch, with our children. And I would say you're just masterful at relationships with our children and family and friends, of just loving us where we're at, as imperfect as we are.
So one of the keys is to marry someone who thinks, who overlooks all your flaws and really only thinks about your good qualities.
Yeah.
Seriously, I mean,
That's
Kelly's got a very forgiving nature, and she doesn't remember all the things and hold on to we haven't been, neither one of us have been perfect, but I especially, and she moves on and moves past it, and it's a real gift. But I think for couples too, it's okay to admit when you need help. We got counseling at one point in our life, in our marriage, because we needed it. We had a kind of around that same time when I had an aunt that came and lived with us because I was traveling all the time. Kelly was pregnant with our sixth. She was having a very rough pregnancy where she wasn't sleeping, and then ended up not being able to drive just because when you're only getting 1 hour of sleep a night. And so, we reached out to people in our life and asked for help, and that's okay. We're made for community
and helping each other.
Yeah.
And, working together. And I'm huge supporter and advocate of God will place whoever he wants in your life to get you through, and we just have to keep our eyes open and our hearts open, and we're not meant to journey alone.
Yeah.
We are meant to be in community and relationship with others, and I have amazing girlfriends that I couldn't imagine being in this world alone, even though my husband is amazing, but like, we're all connected and intertwined, and I think we just always have to keep our eyes and hearts open to allowing people in and being vulnerable to that, because especially as a woman, we feel like, well, like, I've got to do this myself, like or I'm relying too much on other people, or no, I don't want to look vulnerable, like I'm not doing it right, whatever. The devil's got all kinds of, tricks up his sleeve to try to push love away. And it was very humbling when I needed the help that I needed. And I remember I even started taking Zoloft, which is an antidepressant, and I'm like, I'm not depressed, I just can't sleep. I don't know, but it was just, I was like a mess on the floor. I could do nothing. And Jim's going, we need help. Like, I can't do this. Like, we've got 6 little children to take care of. Like, we have to have help. And I'm like, that means I've got to let somebody come in my house and take over, and that was hard. It was just, so we definitely went through rocky times in our life, but I wouldn't trade that for anything because that helped me grow so much. And I made the dearest friends because of it, because I had to say yes, like, I need help, and that was a gift,
I think, and I think we're not big medicine people, so that was a real hard thing to do, to decide. But I've got another friend whose wife also they've got little kids right now, and she also just started on it. But he said it's night and day in terms of what it's like at the home. And we have to recognize that when we're raising our kids, the dynamic in the home is going to affect them forever. And if God's given us a modern medicine that can help, when who knows the reasons why we're struggling and why we might need this at this point in our life, but it actually takes a lot of courage, especially if you come from the perspective we do, that we really, like you said, I'm not depressed, I just need to sleep. Well, the doctor says this is what I need to take so that I can sleep. But if it was depression, that's okay too.
Yeah.
And this thing helps you get over it. And then, but probably the most important thing, and why it's so courageous, is it affects everybody else in your life. In that, Colleen, our oldest daughter, her bedroom was above our bedroom, and she said, I just hear you guys down there laughing at night.
She's told me that too.
And Kelly's got a great sense of humor. We like to laugh.
You're funny. You make me laugh.
So.
But that's great because, a lot of times you hear kids who are constantly hearing their parents fight. And so it's really a breath of fresh air to think, oh, my parents are laughing in the other room. Like, that's a great thing to aspire to, because growing up, whatever is in your house, like, that's what you're used to, and that's what you're like, oh, well, this is how it is, this is how it's supposed to be.
Right.
And so,
that's your expectation.
Right.
Yes.
Right. So thanks for being such a great witness of holiness and what a marriage really should be, of really, like, embracing to strive after the holiness that the Lord has for us, but also, like, laughing together. Like, that's such a gift.
I would say just patience in finding someone who wants to get you to heaven. Like, that's their goal. And vice versa. Your goal is not to fulfill you and to make yourself happy, but your goal is, when you say I do, is my goal is to get this person to heaven. And then knowing that that is their goal as well. So that communication beforehand, and allowing enough time that they're able to show you that while you're courting, with purity, and just in everything, it's all of those things of dying to myself in little ways, in big ways, but that you have that understanding of my goal is to live for you now, like, and to get your soul to heaven, and I think that is overlooked. It's based much more on emotion these days, which doesn't always last.
What can you give me? Not how can I give to you?
Yes, right. And when you do that, it's like this beautiful dance, where I'm living for him, he's living for me, and it works.
Yeah.
Brings a lot of joy in your relationship.
And I think for our own kids, what we would want for them and then for their children is this idea that with each generation, the faith either grows stronger or weaker. It doesn't stay the same. And that's not to say that, my parents, I think, were amazing examples. That's not to say so much in a comparative way. So it's not to say, oh, is my faith stronger than my parents' faith? But have I done everything that I can to build on what I've been given and to grow as close to Christ as possible and to follow his will as close as possible for me and to be as holy as he's calling me to be. And then each generation needs to have that, because otherwise we just see it over time that, you know,
It's watered down.
it gets watered down, and then somebody starts going through the motions, and before you know it, a future generation loses the faith. Yeah, partly for my own kids, our own kids too, but really for anybody out there who might be struggling with a tragedy. Part of the reason that I think the faith in my family is so strong and among my siblings is my grandfather was a real giant in the faith, and during a time of a lot of confusion in the church, really took it upon himself to make sure that his kids and his grandkids knew the faith and were willing to fight for the faith, even in the face of bishops or priests who were not teaching in line with the church. But then my own mom and dad had in 1980 their fifth child. First my dad got a heart failure in 1980, so my mom's got these 5 little kids. Gets a call from the doctor and says he is not going to make it through the night. Basically, be ready to be a widow. She called her dad. He said, "Commit to pray the family rosary for the rest of your life." So my mom basically did it on condition that he would live. And the doctor said, okay, he lived. He's one of the rare people that survives that type of heart failure.
Wow.
And then the doctor said he's just got to avoid stress. And about a month later, the baby gets sick. And then probably 2 or 3 months after that, the baby dies. And he was supposed to avoid stress. That was obviously very stressful for a family. And then a few years later, 5 years later, my brother is born. And then my brother has the same disease. And my brother's not supposed to live. They gave him 0% chance to live past 1.5. And he's 35 years old today and doing really well. But there were 6 to 7 years where he was in and out of the hospital, fed by tube, slept in an oxygen tank, just the stress that puts on a family. But their attitude about all of it, about my sister dying, about everything, was this is God's will, and he loves us, and we don't understand why, but we just have to trust. And I think part of what happened through that is our faith grew so much, but because of their unity and leadership around it.
Wow. It's funny because we have an Aquinas conference happening right now at Ave Maria University, and I just went on to talk about how suffering is one of the biggest ways to evangelize, because when people see that you are suffering and that you still trust the Lord and you are able to still see the good and the joy, and you're like, what's happening?
That's
There's
not
something
possible.
It's not natural for that to happen. So that just kind of reminded me of that, of like going through so much tragedy and being able to like still trust the Lord. It's almost out of this world. It is out of this world. And so yeah, that's really powerful, and I'm sure that played a big role in even your faith growing up, to like see them and to be like, okay, like this is for real. You know, this is something that is worth giving everything for.
Yeah. And my dad told me later, so they got pregnant again when this was after my brother. They got pregnant again when I was in college, and he was really dreading, like, is this going to be another situation with a sick child, because it was genetic, the disorder was genetic. And he said, you know, I failed that test because he did not, and my mom ended up miscarrying. And he said, I was going to the church every day after work because I was so afraid of carrying the cross again. And I said, Dad, you passed. That's what we're supposed to do. We're not supposed to be able to carry the cross on our own. You were throwing it, you know.
Yeah.
So throwing yourself on God, that's what he says. Come to me.
Right. You don't have to do it alone. Like,
Yeah.
I will carry your cross with you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for sharing.
Love you, Jumpa.
I just want to thank Jim and Kelly again for sharing their story with us, and for all their little tidbits and experiences. And we have a lot to learn from you, so thank you so much for sharing and for giving of your time. I hope that from their story and what they had to share, that you were at least inspired or were able to take away something from this and enjoyed it as much as I have. So yes, Thank you, and God bless.